Somebody really needs to tell me why black people are the most sensitive people on planet Earth. So I had this video about how black people don't tip that went super viral on Instagram. And so I open my comments and my DMs, and it's all sorts of people calling me names. You know the names, the Uncle Toms, the this, the that, et cetera, et cetera. And so my question is, why are black people the only group of people that literally can't be critiqued? And if you tell people the truth about themselves and it doesn't come from a bad place, for me, it literally comes from a place of trying to help and saying, this is how the world sees you because this is how you act. So why are black people the only people that are this thin-skinned? Why are they the only people that cannot take any critiques? Why are blacks the only people who are this thin-skinned, who cannot take critiques, who are this emotional, hyper-emotional when you tell them things about why they don't tip and about how they act at restaurants and things that normal human beings know? Normal human beings know that when you go out to restaurants, you tip 18 to 20%. And if you don't want to do that, you say you're broke ass at home and eat food at home. Eat some ramen or something. So why is it that blacks are the only people that can't take these honest, genuine critiques to heart and actually say, hey, if this is how I'm being seen by the world, maybe I should switch it up? But no, they get mad, they get emotional, they get violent. It's insane.
So if you guys don't know who that is Rob Smith. He talks a lot about, especially on TikTok, his Instagram, I guess he's limited the content. I don't see as much, but he's referring to a video that he did on Instagram that went viral in reference to talking about tipping, which is an issue in itself as far as black folks are concerned. Now, I live in Atlanta part-time, right? And for those of you who have been around Atlanta, you know that most restaurants, specifically restaurants that are owned or ran by black people, they're going to automatically put in 18 to 20, sometimes even 30% gratuity, which is insane. Not to mention the amount for parking, not even valet, just parking, just to park at these establishments. And a lot of these Turkish places where you have hookah and whatnot, a lot of them are following this same thing, which to me is just BS. That's why I don't even go to a lot of those places. I think a lot of people don't either, because it's just ridiculous. And let's not even get into this. But they do that because they know that many black folks don't tip. And there's a certain sector of what he's talking about when he's talking about black folks can't be critiqued about their behavior and sensitive about it. But we know the ones that he's talking about. He's not talking about all black folks. So we just need to get that clear, because generalizations when we talk about people tend to be true. And there is a certain sector of black folks he's talking about here, which is unfortunate. If you ever had any waiters or waiter friends, or if you waited tables yourself, you may have encountered the same thing, depending on where you're at. But it happens all the time. That's why they put those things in place, specifically in Atlanta, which is what I don't like personally, because I will tip if it's good service. But if it's sometimes putting that automatic gratuity in there, which you could still tell them to take it off if you don't feel that you had good service at the end of the day, that you could speak to a manager like, yo, remove this. This isn't what I paid for. It's not going down like that. And they just will have to remove it. Because what incentive at the end of the day is it for you to either do a good job or attend to my needs as a consumer or as a customer, if you're automatically going to get that gratuity, which is split anyway, that you're not going to see the most of that anyway. You might see a portion of it. So that is the part that's unfortunate. But I do think that when we get into this, and there was a video I watched, which I won't put on here, by Nick Fuentes, where he speaks on these things. And he mostly talked about customer service. It came across my news feed. Customer service, and with black folks, that specifically black women, a lot of times, you're not going to get the best customer service. There's an attitude. There's a lot of these things that as black folks that we don't like, we don't want to deal with. That's why we do go to certain restaurants that are owned or ran by other white folks. That's, you have the wait staff by white folks, because you run into issues like that. And it's unfortunate. You know, that's how it is. But it all comes down to home. And I don't even want to say training, because training sounds terrible because you're referring to an animal. But the way you're reared, the way you're raised, that this is how you conduct yourself with an attitude. There's always a chip on your shoulder. And who wants to deal with that? Nobody wants to deal with that. And then you turn around and complain at the end of the day. And I think a lot of this came about within the past 35, 40 years with a lot of this foolishness going on. But it's like now it makes you wonder, is there really any hope? Does there need to be a reset button, as a lot of people talk about? So I'm going to get into a clip here that Charlie Kirk was talking to this young man about. Let's jump into that clip, guys. Let's go.
Why have the black community gotten poorer since the passage of the Civil Rights Act? Tell me that.
Because of the way the culture has been perpetuated through the
Hold
years.
on. Think about it. Why is it that black America has gotten richer on average, poorer on average, since America passed all these anti-racist laws?
I can't answer that.
Okay, yeah. So do you think the fact that 70% of black youth don't have a dad around is probably pretty important?
That's because of the culture.
Respectfully allow me to interject. How does the white culture impact the fact whether or not a black dad stays around when he impregnates a woman?
I'm not saying it's the white culture.
What is it?
The culture that has been perpetuated through the 200 years of slavery, the 100 years of segregation, and Jim Crow laws.
The marriage, so I got to interject again. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt too much. But in 1960, before the Civil Rights Act, 20% of black youth had a dad around. Now it's, 20% were single fathers, 80% had a dad around. It's been inverted. So we actually have seen black dads run away from their kids the last 60 years. Why is that?
Because of the raised incarceration rates, because of the perpetuated culture.
So how does one go to jail?
That's obvious. I'm not answering that question.
Yeah, so maybe it's because they committed crimes. The Holocaust was 80 years ago. Half of all the Jews on the planet were killed. Everything they earned was taken. Jews are doing great. They're the wealthiest subgroup, racial group or ethnic group in America. If all of a sudden something that happened 80 years ago impacts your material prosperity, how did Jews defy the curve? How did poor Asians do so well? Why is it that Asians are now the wealthiest minority in America, many of whom came with no money in the 1950s or 60s?
How y'all like to say he's comparing apples to oranges? And I'm not making any excuses, but you have to realize that the Black American or so-called Black American was an invention of the European, correct? The people that he talked about, which I'm not going to say their names, he talked about those, and he talked about the Asians, and he talked about certain people being wiped out and them coming to America. Let's just not talk about that. Let's talk about the whole diaspora in terms of that, of being in Germany, Poland, other places like that, Russia, where it's not the exact same, even though they were thriving at one point. There were laws specifically put in place because you had people who came to America who were passing as white that changed their last names to not be ridiculed or judged or have laws put in place. So they would change their names because of that reason, to not identify with their heritage, for lack of a better term. When you have black folks who were property at one point, were freed, Jim Crow laws weren't put in place for other people, right? It was specifically for black folks. You can say, well, we don't want Asians, we don't want that, but they had their own communities. They weren't coming here in droves till after the civil rights movements. That's what we need to get in. We need to bring that. I'm talking about non-white people, right? You had a small percent, even now, there's still a small percentage of Asians in the United States. That small percentage of Asians came together here as a whole. They never had to deal with the laws that were put in place specifically for black folks. So a lot of the things I feel like he's saying is disingenuous, even when it comes down to, yes, he is correct. Why are fathers not in homes? Welfare, subsidizing women, benefits that a woman can get by going along with it. Even Malcolm X talked about this in his autobiography, where he was saying this was going on back in the 30s and 40s. Basically, hey, we'll give you this check. The man has got to go. Why was this going on? You know what I mean? As opposed to just leaving it to where these benefits, this socialism, these socialistic programs were put in place that eventually just eroded the family dynamic of the black community. So yes, all these things go together in terms of the father ultimately not being present, the marriage rate not being there, and mass incarceration, all these things like that. How do you go to jail? You commit crimes. Yes. Who's more likely to get arrested for committing crimes? Who's more likely to be targeted for committing crimes? There's certain nuances when it comes to all of this, guys. Just my thoughts. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Comment below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Much blessings and abundance. Stick around for the next videos. It's going to pop up on the screen below. That's where I'm going to see you guys at. It's your favorite everything. This is Wisdom. I'm the best. Let's run it up to 1 million. Quit playing with me. Peace.